Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Foreign Strategies. Prepare for takeoff.
Yo, what's going on, guys? So I just recently got back from both Athens, Greece, Kyiv, Ukraine, and Budapest, Hungary recently, and I want to do a direct comparison between Kyiv and Budapest in this video so you guys can see which one is better for you. Let's start with the things that I really like about Budapest compared to Kyiv. So the number one thing that I like about Budapest over Kyiv is the fact that it's very international. The first time that I went to Budapest was back, I think, in 2017. And when I was there, I practically, majority of the time, was associating with people who were not even from Budapest, which was kind of odd. That definitely wasn't ideal, but it was just the fact that it was so international that, I mean, you're kind of flooded with people from all over the place, which can be both a pro and a con. So international thing is more for the people who are traveling to both get the experience of the culture as well as just meeting people in general, especially if you're staying in hostels. But when I went there the first and second time, I didn't stay in a hostel. How I met people were on bar crawls. And actually, the first time I've been there back in 2017, I met a couple guys that pretty much we still stay in touch with today. So it's a great place to meet people, great place to meet people from all over, great place to just have a good time. So that's the number one thing that I like about Budapest over Kyiv. Kyiv is better for if you're just strictly trying to immerse yourself in the culture of the actual country that you're visiting to, which is also an extremely good thing. The number two thing that you might like about Budapest over Kyiv is that it's easier to get accustomed to. Hungary is in the EU, so essentially you get a little more of those Western vibes there than a place like Ukraine, which can be a good thing or a bad thing. But if you're new to traveling, a place like Budapest is going to be much easier to travel to if you're coming from a west comparable to Ukraine. Ukraine is not like extremely like hard to get used to, etc. I'm not saying that, but if I have to pick which one's easier, Budapest. And it kind of piggybacks on what I just mentioned about Budapest being very international. So you're not going to feel alone in a place like Budapest compared to what you're going to feel like in Kyiv. Some people who haven't traveled, Kyiv is going to be a huge culture shock. You're going to go there and people might not look like you, talk like you, think like you. So you might feel a little lost if that's not something you're used to. In Budapest, you're not going to deal with that as much because you still get that kind of Central Eastern, like European vibe, but you also get that sprinkle of the West in it as well. So it makes things a little bit easier. It's like an entry point, and then once you've been a little more experienced, then I would say a place like Kyiv will be a little bit simpler to get accustomed to because the culture there is much different than I would say the West. It may not be as extreme as Russia, but it's like in between Russia and the West. So it's a little bit different, guys. So I think it takes a little bit more experience, especially if you're really trying to immerse yourself. The number three thing that you might like about Budapest over Kyiv is, let's say you have a short trip. Let's say you have a week, right? You have a week, you've been working hard, and you want to use this time as just a vacation, a time to let loose, a time to have fun, not necessarily a time to like learn or just experience a different culture. You just want to go have fun. Budapest will be that place over Kyiv. Kyiv takes a little bit more time to learn the lay of the land comparable to Budapest. Budapest, you can go straight out the gates, hop in a bar crawl, hop in a hostel, and right off the gates you can have fun, right? Meet people, etc. Kyiv, the environment's not as open as a place like Budapest, so I wouldn't recommend for a week-long trip. Kyiv, to me, is like a month plus type of place you want to go to. So I would say Kyiv is more for those people who are wanting to, I would say, stay someplace for a long time and just immerse themselves in the culture. Budapest, you could also do that as well. I'm not saying that's not something you're going to do in Budapest, but in this scenario, a week-long vacation, you just want to have a good time, Budapest would be my choice for that. Now let's move on to Kyiv. What do I think is better in Kyiv than in Budapest? So number one is Kyiv is cheaper, guys. this last time that I came to Budapest, I was really surprised of the cost of stay. I was like, this is like almost double of what I paid back in 2017. So I was a little turned off by that, but I guess speaking to someone, they were saying that after this whole event, like when things started opening up a bit, they just jacked up the prices to try to gain back their losses. But yeah, big turn off for me. Kyiv was much cheaper. I feel like you got much more for your money when it comes to stay. Secondly, the food is also cheaper in Kyiv, but the one caveat about that is Kyiv, the portion sizes were ridiculously small. Like I had to order 2 meals every time I ordered. I mean, so the price kind of went up because of that. But if you're a small eater, like if you don't eat that much food, Kyiv is gonna be dirt cheap for you. If you're a guy like me, it's gonna be like you're back in the US, if not more. But yeah, overall it's cheaper. Maybe going to the grocery store might be a better bet in Kyiv than ordering out because of the portion sizes. But if you do entree to entree, groceries to groceries, Kyiv will be cheaper based off my experience. So that's a big plus. If you're traveling on a budget, you want to go somewhere that's cheap, Kyiv would be the place over Budapest. The number two thing that you might like about Kyiv over Budapest, and this all depends on what type of person you are, but a person like me is I travel for different experiences. So to me, Kyiv is more exotic than a place like Budapest. And this also piggybacks on what I mentioned. What I actually like about Budapest is that it's very international, right? So what that means is if you're immersing yourself in that international group environment, you're not really getting exotic experience like you would get in a place like Kyiv, where you're 90% of the time going to be surrounded by strictly Ukrainian people. So that makes the experience a little different, because I think the Ukrainian culture is much different from the US than the Hungarian culture, in the sense that, you know, Hungary's in the EU now, so they're getting a little more of that Western influence. So that's, even though obviously the Hungarian culture is much different, I think they have a little more of that Western influence there than a place like Kyiv. So in Kyiv, I really feel like I'm learning more about just like the world in general. Like for example, I went out with a lady whose dad is currently in the conflict currently fighting in the Ukrainian-Russian conflict right now. And we just kind of talk about that whole situation and what's going on, like what's going on with their family. I mean, and those are conversations you can't just have anywhere in the world, right? You hear about these things in the news, like what's going on in these places, but actually speaking to someone who's currently living in what's going on and has like family members who are actually involved in the conflict, it really opens your eyes to a lot of things. You really learn a lot. And you get to see a different perspective than just learning and reading about it through the news. So that was a very eye-opening experience, is being able to be immersed in a culture that's very different, learn how they think, learn how they do, why they do certain things, and just learn about the current events that's going on in these places. So that's a big plus for me. It's very exotic, it's very different. So if you're a person who likes exotic, very different experiences than what you're used to, a place like Kyiv will be better than Budapest. So the number 3 thing that you might like in Kyiv over Budapest, let's say you're traveling and you wanted to date. In Kyiv, you're gonna get more of the conservative type dating scene comparable to Budapest. Budapest, I would say, is more progressive when it comes to dating. So a lot of guys I know from the West are kind of sick of what's going on with the whole, you know, everything is very, very progressive, X, Y, Z. When it comes to dating, they just want to kind of go back. I think traditional is a little strong to say, because I wouldn't say that's exactly what you're going to get in Kyiv is the whole traditional. I think that's a little overly pushed. I would say it's more conservative. And I personally like that. I enjoy the conservative side of dating because I see a lot of benefits on that. I think there needs to be some type of restrictions as human beings, and I think when things become too progressive, things get out of control. And that's kind of what we're seeing back in places like the US. I mean, places not just the US, but in West in general, when things are just kind of loosey-goosey. So So yeah, if you're a guy like me and enjoys the conservative side of things, a place like Kyiv will be great for you. One thing that we'll mention is Kyiv isn't a place that I would recommend any guy to go. I would say this place it takes a little more experience in the game. So if you're a guy who just wants easy hookups, etc., Kyiv's not gonna be a place for you. Kyiv is gonna be a place for the guys who are looking more for long-term relationships, guys who have some time to be there, and guys who are experienced. Comparable to Budapest. Budapest, yes, if you want to go have a good time, Budapest is a great place to go because, like I said, there's going to be a lot of travelers there, a lot of people there just there to have a good time. Whereas Kyiv, you're not going to get that same atmosphere at all. But if you're looking for a long-term relationship, you're looking for a very, very attractive woman, oh, Kyiv, it's a very hard place to be. Like, the ratio of beautiful women in a place like Kyiv is something I've never seen before across the globe. But yeah, so those are the top reasons that I like about each city over the other. If you guys enjoyed the video, please go ahead and like it, share, subscribe, do whatever you got to do. And if you need any help when it comes to traveling to either Kyiv or Budapest or anywhere else in Europe, secondly, guys, check out Herbal Herbs. Herbal Herbs have been working wonders on my body. But all in all, guys, I really appreciate you for checking out the video. Really appreciate your support as always. But until next time, guys, y'all take care.
Thanks for flying with Foreign Strategies. Make sure you subscribe.